Yo, what's going on YouTube, Gen X? Alright, I would consider this one to be an important video. I was talking to a friend, and she's working on doing her research. And, we were talking, and she's looking at out-of-wedlock pregnancies um, amongst high school teenagers, okay? That's what she's looking for. It's a growing trend. And obviously it's not ideal. Anybody who wants to come on and talk about how, times are changing, yeah, they are, but these are one of those changes that don't really help. It's not a good sort of change. It's definitely a problem. Um, so I wouldn't even call it some sort of adaptation to the changing times, not at all. So that's what she's looking at now. Obviously, it's more detailed and more complicated. It is at that academic level, but pretty much she's looking at you know high school pregnancy, and she's looking at what's going on in the middle, upper, and lower income, poverty-stricken environments. And that's, like I said, this is like a basic description of what she has going on. It's definitely a whole lot more complicated. Um, and we were talking, and obviously, based off of some of her research, she didn't find too much high school pregnancies going on um, in upper class sort of environments. And that's pretty much a no-brainer. Upper class environments, they tend to be isolated from the rest of America, so they're controlled. I don't know if people have ever really been in a true upper class environment where everything is catered to a certain crowd, and you're not worrying about outsiders. Picture your whole community gated as opposed to just your neighborhood, right? Um, and then when she looked at those in lower income, poverty-stricken environments, obviously it was more prevalent. You're dealing with broken homes, lack of parental support, lack of role models, and, all the good stuff. Um, so it's pretty clear in terms of why you see it going on there. But she did overlook the fact that, especially in the black community, it's almost like a rite of passage to have a child at an early age. That's one thing that I did, bring up to her, because you can't necessarily measure that, but it has to be put out there, whether we like it or not. A lot of what we see out of younger women getting pregnant is not, some sort of accident. It's planned. Planned, planned, planned. Like I said, it's a rite of passage, right? Um, I hate to say it, but it's the truth. I've not only black women, but I've talked to Hispanic chicks, and mainly those two, and let them not have a kid, and they're selling it, right? In terms of, hey, I'm quality because I don't have a kid. So what does that tell you in terms of how prevalent it is? It is a rite of passage, and that's something that I don't know if she's going to add that into her study, but it's definitely there. It's just hard to measure. Um, but the bulk of our conversation was on the middle class, because when she was, doing her research and doing her observations, um, it was somewhat I don't want to say prevalent, but it was there, right? It was there in terms of, these teenage girls getting pregnant. Um, Obviously not in the same numbers as the whole poverty, lower income, but it was there, and it was one of those, this is pretty significant. But she was struggling because of the why. Why? Mom and dad are there. Mom and dad have jobs. Mom and dad, went to college, okay? Um, Girl lives in good home. Girl lives in good environment. Girl is not struggling for um, the sort of support that you would think that a child needs. So she had a hard time coming up with what was going on. And this is where the bulk of our conversation um, went to. And I wrote the stuff down. Hold on. Um, okay, here's what she didn't understand. Yeah, you have mom and dad that are there and mom and dad are working, but they're always gone. They're always at work. Unfortunately, one of the, I would say, cons of the middle class is that they don't spend properly. So they're always working. You know, as much as you live in a nice house and you're driving a nice car, you're always 3 or 4 months away from being broke, right? You know, there's no buffer zone. So mom and dad are always working as much as possible, trying to get ahead, right? You know, the problem with middle class is they don't control spending. They believe that you work hard, and the money that you spend as opposed to you work hard. That money you make that money work for you and you grow it, right? It's a very barbaric way of thinking. So a lot of the times you'll have middle class parents that just work, work, work. Okay? Yeah, they're there. So technically, you know, if the kid has some parent-teacher conference, somebody's going to show up, but that doesn't mean that they're involved. Okay? That's a factor that she didn't, you know, look at. Also, and this is probably the most important point that I brought to her attention, when you're living in Southern California, our middle class, for the most part, isn't so much isolated, okay? It's not. So you can go to a high school that may even be in a middle class area, but you have kids from poverty, kids from lower income environments still at that school, okay? You know, they're either getting bused in or whatnot, or they just fall under that, you know, region. Um, so you're exposed to a whole lot more. You know, even going out, you're going to the mall, you're going to a party, there's a mix of middle class and, you know, inner city, lower income, poverty. There's a big mix. You know, just growing up, I had friends that were involved in gang violence. I had people who were shot and killed, people who were doing drugs. Did they live by me? No. But we went to the same schools, you know, we went to the same malls, we went to the same movie theaters. So you're still exposed to that culture, whether you like it or not. You're exposed to it. And oftentimes, middle class parents don't understand that their child is still being exposed to what they don't want them to be exposed to. Um, so what happens, right? Think about it. So you have the girls, and let's say they're black or Hispanic or even white, who are coming from decent homes, but mom and dad are always working, so that they're not really close. You know, they're not really monitoring what their child is doing. And these girls go to school, they hang out, they're talking on the phone, and they may be interacting with other younger girls who don't have their same sort of support. So that maybe they're coming from a background of poverty or lower income where dad is not there, mom can't keep it together, there's little guidance, you know, there's men, older men exploiting them, you know, let me take care of you, let me be your pseudo daddy, but at the same time, I'm getting sex from you, you know, all that happens. So these daughters are still they're still being exposed to it, right? It's as simple as that. They're being exposed to it. Um, you know, and like I said before, they're being exposed to that rite of passage, right? You know, being that younger single mother, it's cool. You know, you look at MTV and Society, Juno, movies like Juno, you know, it's cool now. There's no shame, right? You know, oh, I'm pregnant. There's no shame. There's no real shame there. Um, so what's going on? And like I said, a lot of the times the parents have this belief that they've done enough, right? Well, you know, we made it to the middle class, so what more can you say, right? Is it my fault? I did everything that we're supposed to do. And like I said, they negate the fact that your child is still being exposed to the bullshit that you want to keep them away from. That's why it's important to always monitor your friends. You know, we understood that growing up. So when my little sister went through high school, we knew what was going on, right? You know, we knew, or especially me, I knew I had to monitor her friends, right? It wasn't enough to say, oh, you know, we go to the same school. Well, we live in a middle-class neighborhood, and the school is in a middle-class environment. So, by default, your friends should know how to act accordingly. No. You know, I was on my sister. I was looking at her friends. making sure that she was around the people who had the similar background. And lo and behold, um, some of my sister's friends who had that middle class background, who didn't have maybe their parents or a brother or some sort of family member looking after who they were around, fell victim to, the same shit that their parents thought that they were avoiding. So it's very important, if you're a parent, you have a younger brother or sister, or some cousin or somebody um, you can't just say, oh, well, we're living in the middle class and their school's in a middle class environment, so by default they're going to be okay. No, you have to be on it. Who are you going out with? Who are you hanging with? Because they're going to be exposed to it. Especially in Southern Cali, where our middle class, in my opinion, there's no geographic barrier. Literally, you can have, a tract of homes that's considered middle class, and 5 minutes away, you have a high crime area. Literally, that's how it is out here. That's why a lot of people were like, yo, I can't live in Cali. There's no true middle class neighborhoods like that, right? There's middle class prices, but you don't get the full effect of this middle class sort of complete environment. We have some, but for the most part, not so much, at least in my opinion. So it's there. So I was, throwing that at her, and it was helping. So I was like, maybe I should bring this to YouTube and Gen X, because maybe this may be useful to some of you guys. So anyways, that's my vid. I'm going to leave it there. The same thing happens to the boys as well. So don't think that I haven't forgot about y'all. They get caught up. I knew plenty of guys. Mom and dad both went to college. The boys end up in jail. I knew guys that got killed, unfortunately, or guys who just fell off. And I'm like, yo, I've been in your home, right? Your dad has an Omega Sci-Fi license plate, yet you're in jail or you're down and out. And this goes back to the whole parents thinking that their job is done simply because they put their child in a middle-class environment and they weren't paying attention to what they were doing, right? It's not a lock. There's a difference between living in the upper class where you truly have that complete isolation, right? You have that geographic sort of barrier, right? Where for a fact, hey, we're living in Beverly Hills, so we know, right, what our children are being exposed to and shit. The moms aren't working anyways, so they're paying attention to what their child does, right? They put their children on a schedule. I've worked with students who came from upper class environments, and those kids are on a tight schedule. Their parents know, unfortunately, better than I guess some of the other groups. So they are everywhere in terms of what their kids are doing, right? They're everywhere. So anyways, that's my vid. I'm going to leave it here. I guess this is more so for the parents and the educators and those who have teenagers in their lives that they're looking out for, and, you want to see them do well. Let me know what you think. Take it easy. God bless.